Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us. Today, we are taking a really fascinating look into the future, specifically the future of education. We're going to visualize what the classroom of 2030 actually looks like. And to do this, we're not just, guessing. We're grounding this whole journey in some incredible, hard data from the National Center for Education Statistics' latest forecast. Plus, we'll pair that with some cutting-edge philosophical shifts documented by the OECD. So we're looking at the numbers, and we're looking way beyond them.
Okay, let's dive into this. When you picture a school 10 years from now, what do you see? Like more students, bigger buildings, even more standardized tests? Well, the answer we found in the data is probably going to challenge almost everything you assume about where our school systems are heading.
Let's start with Section 1, the shrinking classroom.
The very first thing we absolutely have to understand is the macro-level demographic data, and it reveals a massive surprise. Our school system is actually shrinking. According to the data, total student enrollment in public and private elementary and secondary schools is projected to drop to 52.1 million by the year 2030. To put that into perspective, that is an 8% decrease from the 56.3 million students enrolled back in 2019. An 8% drop across an entire national system, that's a massive literal tectonic shift in how we need to think about infrastructure and resources.
But this drop isn't uniform across all age groups. The pipeline is actually shrinking from the bottom up. Pre-K through 8th grade enrollment is projected to see a pretty steep 10% decline. Meanwhile, grades 9 through 12 are projected to drop by only 2%. So what you should really take away from this is that we are looking at a long-term demographic shift. Fewer young kids are entering the system right now, which is eventually going to ripple up through the high schools in the decades to follow.
And when we split this between public and private schools, the disparity is just as striking. Public schools are expected to decrease by about 4% from their 2020 numbers. But private schools, their enrollment is projected to take a much, much harder hit, dropping by an astonishing 12% by 2030 compared to where they were in 2019.
That brings us to Section 2, changing demographics and regions.
It's not just the total volume of students changing either. The geographic makeup of the 2030 student body is shifting dramatically. Looking state by state, an overwhelming 38 states will see lower public school enrollments over the decade. Only 12 states, plus the District of Columbia, are projected to see any increase at all.
Breaking that down by region, you can really see where the contraction is hitting the hardest. The Northeast and the West are experiencing the sharpest declines, both dropping by 6%. The Midwest follows that with a 4% drop, while the South is seeing the mildest decrease at just 2%. So, if you are a school planner in the Northeast or the West, your reality over the next few years is going to look very, very different than a planner down South.
By 2030, we're also looking at massive shifts in the cultural identities within our public schools. White student enrollment is projected to decrease by 10%, and Native American student enrollment by 15%. But at the exact same time, there is a staggering 26% projected surge in students identifying as two or more races. The classroom of 2030 is undeniably going to be a far more diverse and multicultural space.
Moving on to Section 3, the teacher equation. Let's look at workforce changes.
Okay, so we've talked all about shrinking student populations, but what happens to the educators? Well, it turns out the teacher workforce is shrinking too. The data projects that the total number of teachers is going to decrease by 5%. That leaves roughly 3.5 million educators in the system by 2030. Now, you might initially think, fewer teachers? That has to be bad news for the classroom, right? But hold on just a second.
Now, what's really interesting here is a bit of a plot twist, because student enrollment, remember that's an 8% overall drop, is actually falling faster than the 5% drop in the teacher workforce. The overall pupil-to-teacher ratio actually improves. By 2030, the national pupil-to-teacher ratio is projected to drop to 14.9, and in private schools it drops even lower to a ratio of 10.4.
Think about why this absolutely matters. Smaller classes equal more personalized potential. Fewer students per teacher means educators finally have the bandwidth to focus more on individual needs. This is where we kind of pivot from the hard, macro-level numbers to the actual human experience of learning. The data strongly suggests that, structurally, we are heading toward an environment that can support a totally different kind of teaching.
Which perfectly cues up Section 4, rethinking traditional education.
Now that we know the 2030 classroom is going to be smaller and more diverse, we have to look at the educational philosophy that's going to fill it. For this, we turn to the framework laid out by the OECD. The contrast between the old and the new is just stark. The traditional model was built a lot like a factory, right? It's linear, decisions are totally top-down, teachers teach, students passively listen, and success is measured by rigid, standardized tests. But the new normal the OECD describes, it is a complete 180. It's nonlinear, responsibility is shared, and assessments are incredibly varied and dynamic.
The OECD defines this as ecosystem learning. I really love this concept. In ecosystem learning, the student's role fundamentally changes. They're no longer just a passive receptacle for facts. They are an active participant, a true stakeholder in their own educational journey. Decision-making is a shared responsibility among teachers, principals, parents, and, crucially, the students themselves. Let's dive into Section 5, the new normal, focusing on the student experience.
Let's zoom all the way into the micro-level student experience for the year 2030. The smaller classrooms we established in our data analysis are exactly what enables this highly responsive system to actually work. First, student well-being is valued right alongside academic performance. Second, diverse backgrounds and learning styles are recognized. Remember that massive 26% surge in multiracial students we talked about earlier? This system is built to embrace them. And third, the system monitors for frequent feedback, not just accountability. Continuous feedback loops replace the intense anxiety of that rigid, once-a-year standardized test.
So the crucial point here, according to the OECD, is this. The future, by definition, is unpredictable. But by developing responsive education systems, we can help our children adapt to thrive in and even shape whatever the future holds. Responsiveness and adaptability, that is the ultimate toolkit for 2030. And that leaves us with this final thought. We know the system is shrinking. We know it's becoming way more diverse. And we know the old factory model is being completely replaced by an adaptable ecosystem. So will a smaller, more responsive education system be the ultimate key to thriving in an unpredictable future? That is the question we will all be watching unfold over the next decade. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.